everyone, Ivy League Gaming here, and today we're playing Dragonheir Silent Gods. For today's video, we're going to talk about elemental affinity and the best heroes to use for optimal team synergy. This time, the video is focused on fire and poison. To be clear, we do mean Season 1. Alright, so I'm continuing my little series giving some love to the Season 1 people that are sitting there waiting for a while to get to Season 2. I wanted to make these videos kind of talking about the best heroes to use for overall progression that are going to shine in dungeons, that are worth building, that fulfill their roles the best, including separately talking about Vortex maybe, because that can have its own strategy, I guess. But I've played through a whole season now. We've seen the endgame content. We have kind of got a feel for which heroes are really going to be able to shine in maybe some unexpected areas. So now that I've played a whole season, I feel like doing this video is more appropriate. Plus, there's always going to be new players starting on Season 1, so I really hope this is helpful for all of you. So poison and fire. This has been a great synergy for a lot of content, honestly. Very strong. The only thing I have to say is alert, alert. If this is your first week of gameplay, especially if you still have that hero reset and you could choose what to do, I don't suggest you focus fire and poison right away. Beating the flame domain dungeon is really hard. And while you do get Horus for free and Hexandra for free, yes, build them. Let those be your first fire and poison that you end up maxing out. But for your adventure, even if you're using with them, make sure you switch your adventure to a different affinity before ascending your rank. But that's the problem. The rank ascension is so hard to do because the flame domain has the burn enemy, right? So you need to space out. Number one, space out your heroes as you're farming the flame domain. So there's always one tile between them so they don't get extra burn damage. And number two, you're still going to get burns. So besides the splash damage, so you still need resistance, or you need to have cleansers, debuff dispellers, good tanks like a Fitz that dispels the debuffs, or yeah, cleansers, even just like Enna, like we talk about. And so the higher level you get, the harder it is to progress in those domains with the characters you're using, and that's one of the hardest. So just a warning, don't go all in and pick 5 people of poison and or fire. For your very first people to build, you're gonna regret it. So team synergy number 1, tip number 1, just don't do it for your first people, except for a couple like Horus and Hexandra you can get away with. Or if you're lucky and early you pull a Solday or a Dolphus, you could use them at like a Solday instead of Horus. Or if you pull Furboth instead of whatever, you could use him instead of Horus. But Horus is really solid through endgame content. So yeah, let's kind of start there. Let's talk about our tanks. So the defensive role in poison and fire, luckily for Season 1, is kind of taken care of for you for the most part. Horus is very good, very, very good at surviving. And usually when you're doing a Vortex battle, the tank is going to die first because they're the one taking the big hit, the single target hit from the boss. But he has this extra like chance of obtaining another shield. He's just really, really tanky here, and he does really well in a lot of hard-hitting content where you need really strong survivability. And he'll do better than a Solday and Furboth for survivability in some of those cases. Doesn't mean he's a better option, just for certain ones he is. Like Ancient Battlefield, I think I would say I would use Horus a lot too if you don't have other options. Just turn off his ultimate for no buffs. But yeah, he's very good and very, very survivable. A Solday is top tier though as well, but mainly for something like Vortex or the Endgame Dragon, the Resurgent Dragon, because everyone needs to be close to her in order to benefit from this shield that she's going to give her allies. If you're not close to her, you're not benefiting from the shield. So keep that in mind with your positioning, that matters a lot. Same thing, defense up to targets within range. This is a very close range, so usually this is only helping your other melee characters, except in something like Vortex. She is going to pair very well with Adolphus, who is our one of my favorite support heroes, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But that is a really great synergy. So luckily, when it comes to these epics, you're solid. I wouldn't worry about the rares for sake of building at all. At all. I mean, maybe you could use Yamara if you need another tank at the very end game content. Like if you built a bunch of wild people or a bunch of poison people and you need one more tank for synergy, she will do just fine with her attack penalty to 100% chance to land. So she actually is pretty solid, but because we have Horus for free, most people are not going to need to build Yamara unless it's for bonus teams at the very end of the season. So regarding tanks, the other strong ones to mention would be Furboth, of course. I really can't see using Gareth over Isolde or Horus. I still think they're better. But Furboth is an endgame and all content monster. He heals. He brings attack penalty, a 100% chance to land with books. Really, really helpful there. But again, his healing, you need to be close to him. So he's also better in something like Vortex if you're relying on him for healing. And then, yeah, he has a little bit of dispelling a buff from him. It comes in handy. And he brings a defense and dungeon aura. But Furboth, we love him. He is really great. And with the synergy, he's a really great option for your strong Vortex team. But we'll talk about that later. Overall, all the epics are pretty solid. Again, I don't know that I would use Gareth. He's okay because he brings attack penalty as well at 100% chance to land. But I much would prefer Horus or I can't say I prefer Horus. To be fair, Gareth at least brings this on an ultimate that's predictable and you can land it when you want to. So maybe I would actually prefer Gareth over Horus, but Horus has great survivability, so no regrets if you fully max your Horus. Now let's talk about our support heroes, right? So let's go back to fire. So when it comes to composing a team, you're usually going to have a tank and then a healer or two, or like a healer and a shielder, and then you're going to have your DPS, right? And Adolphus is just so good to fulfill so many roles. He is a shielder that also brings a little bit of damage, so that doesn't hurt. And he also heals with his passive, with excess shields are converted into healing. So if you have him and Isolde on the same team, he's going to be very strong in any content. Very, very good. As far as other proper supports go here, Liko is very underwhelming, the character we get from Pillar of Trial. I really think they need to buff her or change her kit completely so that she can be viable for Ancient Battlefield. Otherwise, I don't see much of a point to her. She's kind of weird. Ferrara is okay. Actually, the epics are pretty solid. Buff Prohibition is helpful on the battle skill, kind of like a Voresh. And then accuracy penalty here and dispelling 2 buffs. So I think this guy is, or girl, this is a girl. Or wait, no, maybe not. I don't know. Okay, anyway. Ferrara actually might be a bit of a sleeper as a substitute Voresh. If you guys get this one early and you're trying to have synergy for your Ancient Battlefield farming and you want fire and poison to go with like your Sigrid, for example, this is a very good option. So resistance in all battles as well could be amazing for something. Or if you get this character early on, it's probably really smart to build them. I think there's someone I'm going to try to build next season for some content because I don't see them use that much, which I can't believe when you read their kit. It's actually amazing. Because this extra resistance and stuff can be huge early game for something where there's debuffs like Grave of Rot, for example. Dane's okay, but not the best. He only puts up the small version of attack penalty, which kind of sucks, but he can dispel 2 buffs from enemies within range, so at least he brings that. And it is a 100% chance to land these. So a lot of people were pairing Dane with Sigrid because he's gonna put up a solid buff, right? Attack penalty, he's gonna put it up, and then after he goes and does his AoE, you have Sigrid go after him. And that's a really big synergy, is making sure someone with a buff that's an AoE, or sorry, a debuff, someone that puts up a debuff with an AoE is out. If I said buff, I'm sorry. Someone that puts up a debuff like attack penalty, anything in red, has to go before Sigrid goes with her ultimate if you want to have multiple enemies hit. Really, really good synergy there, but I don't love Dane because it's a small version, and there's just better options if you're looking for attack penalty 1. And honestly, when it comes to, I mean, for healing prohibition, we now have Sigrid, so you don't really need him for that, where he used to be usable for that. But I think this is okay. Recharging ultimate energy is if you do build him early on for pairing with Sigrid, especially in like goblin runs, this ultimate energy thing is going to come back in handy, and so is his AoE damage for the end game Resurgent Dragon. So I feel like Dane kind of, he can work, and he's really good for the Resurgent Dragon with that in mind, but with the AoE in mind and with this in mind. But there's so many better options for attack penalty, for buff strip, and for this that I don't know that I would choose him as my top option anymore. I feel like he's fallen out of the meta a little bit, but people do still widely use him, depending on who you're using with Sigrid. So I feel like a lot of people are still going to strongly use him in Season 1. But I think for the sake of the buff strip, I really like Ferrara better, which is a really fun find, honestly. It depends on what you're using for a team, though. Brody does like a dispelling of shields, so he can be really good against the Grave of Curse. That's one of his great support niche uses. All right, so on to poison. Actually, and as far as the rares go, oh yeah, rares. Dubik. So Dubik also dispels control debuffs, which can come in handy if you're going against an enemy, even in the otherworld exploration and harder content, that has control, you know, stuns, freezes, whatever. He is really good for that. So don't underestimate him if you're actually looking for someone to deal with control. You might be surprised and use a Dubik in your team. I don't really see, I mean, Zadie and Gloin are okay, but I think we'll skip talking about them as the best. Epics. Now, when it comes to our support poisoners, this is one of the best groupings of characters for the sake of survivability, heals, everything like that. It's so good. We've got Hexandra that we get for free, right? She's amazing. She's one of the best healers. You can use her in Ancient Battlefield because she doesn't put up any buffs. Cyphrus is a great healer once especially you get the healer and she revives, but she sacrifices herself. But so you really want to get the set, the legendary set, the green one from Grave of Curse that is self-healing set, kind of. So that way she can keep herself alive, or you need really strong healers on your team besides her, or she's just going to keep killing herself in a long battle. But she's really great for Arena, and I did find a lot of use for her in some content. Garion's pretty solid as a healer. Vikuk brings heals and dispel of debuffs. He had 2 debuffs. Brings attack penalty on the battle skill. He's very, very good hero as well. Ekis is like probably a bit underrated, but she's melee. So there's a lot of situations where melee is not ideal. She does bring recharging speed penalty and healing prohibition. And a charm. So I feel like she could definitely be used in some content where melee is okay. Or maybe even having a little bit of fun with some team synergy in Arena still. But she's falling off the meta a little bit. A Gigel actually can be, if you don't have a Sigrid, you get a Gigel, he'll be okay as your healing prohibition hero. If you need him for some content against bosses, he hits 3 times, so he's probably going to land it. But we know Sigrid is kind of our queen of supports. She's very good, very, very good. She attacks every enemy that has a debuff on the field, if they have a debuff. So you really want to pair her with people that do debuffs. And then she hit us healing prohibition on both her battle skill and her ultimate. So she's really strong anywhere you need a healing prohibition hero. So if you're working on something for, like anything where the boss heals, right? Anything where the boss heals, the enemies are healing, Sigrid is going to be your girl. Litalis can be a pretty good hero to pair with Sigrid in the same way we would talk about Dane. He has an AoE with healing prohibition here, or healing the small version or big version of healing prohibition. So that's really nice. Plus he brings an where is it? Ultimate energy, which is interesting reduction, and attack penalty. He always has a chance to inflict the small version at least to help keep that up. So he's okay. He's not like the top tier, but you will see him used in endgame dungeons with like stage 9s with Sigrid. You'd be surprised that you'll still see him used there. So If you're looking for someone to pair with Sigrid, for the sake of debuffs, he's a decent one, although I would actually prefer Dane if you're trying to get a 5-person synergy, because at least Dane is bringing something else with the attack penalty as an AoE instead of him just bringing more and more of the healing prohibition. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I feel like the decrease attack is a little more helpful because Sigrid is going to do just fine at preventing healing. Keep in mind, early game, when it comes to synergies and that 3-person versus 5-person, or it could be 4 people as well, you don't have to worry about 5 until you're later on. You're not getting any bonuses from that. But, of course, everyone in the team can still benefit, not only 3 people. Alright, so that's kind of our supports. Sigrid is still queen of the game. She does amazing, and as a support, she's actually doing insane damage. You can build her for damage with some accuracy, and she will smack as long as you set up properly to really take advantage of her. Alright, so now I guess the reality is, okay. Let's talk about our poison heroes. So poison is okay in this game, but it's not the best. So Dench can put up a shit ton of poisons. So if you're looking for someone to be like, when they do more damage based on the stacks of poison, Dench is great to pair with them. Like someone like him for getting more crit. Having a Dench on the team would be great. And he actually, Holas actually smacks. Holas is a beast. He hits hard, and he has the poison debuff as well, but he like triggers them. Eli's another one who has some poison in his kit, but also can hit pretty solid with 3 attacks here on his ultimate, although he has that straight line ultimate, so he's still pretty solid as a main DPS for poisoners. Skink is going to do a bit, but he's melee. Corrin is pretty solid too. Notira, not as good. Lorari, not as good as I would hope. But honestly, I don't really like poisoners in this game anymore because the more I try to play with them, I started with Eli last season in beta, well, in season 0, with Eli as my main DPS, and he was okay. I was able to push through most dungeons with that. But poisoners are hard to build because you need accuracy to land the debuff. And then usually you want them to crit and do, so crit rate, crit damage, attack. Poisons as a debuff scale with attack, but we also know it's affected by enlightenment even though it doesn't say it. So it's like you want enlightenment and accuracy and attack and crit rate and crit damage, and I just feel like they're a little bit too intensive. So when it comes to a lot of content, you are going to probably push your unique wild characters as a focus, maybe even more so than poison, honestly, especially if you get lucky and you pull a Flora. But as a free-to-play friendly conversation, we have to talk about Erich. We get him for free in Season 1, and he's actually totally worth maxing out. I kind of underrated him the beginning of the season and before, but I maxed out my Erich and I used him everywhere. He really is great at enabling a wild team. He goes very often. He gets more chances to have successful wild procs as he goes on. It's just really cool. And he hits 5 times with his ultimate. So if you're going against a single target enemy and he hits 5 times, he or Tunnelnon are great candidates for Witch's Remains or the Crown of Unclean to make sure you're landing that defense penalty debuff. Tunnelnon is probably another one who is a legendary in disguise. She's a monster. Literally, she just smacks really hard. She puts an attack buff up. She hits, 5 times here, 3 times here. Like, she's just really, really good. Extra crit in her kit, so easier to build. So she's actually one because she's so easy to build with the crit. Like, I think that's a big reason why people choose to put the Witch's Remains or Crown on Tunnelnon for things like Vortex, because she's gonna smack, and you could still build her with accuracy, and she's still gonna smack. Like, she's just a really good candidate. Karaman is our little jump-to-the-back assassin who is highly used in Arena, so you're gonna see him used there. Refe is now called Foley again, don't worry. Back in Season 2, they changed her name back. This is really Foley, this is not Refe. I don't know why they accidentally changed her name in the middle of it to the same name as someone else, but they did. She's very solid. If you can if you get a Refe, and you can book her, I highly suggest it. She did better for me than Elfie at enabling my wild team for the longest time. It wasn't until I fully booked Erich that I finally took Refe out of my wild team. So wild is very strong. If you're looking at the rares, I really like Thea. Thea has amazing damage potential. She really ramps up, and she comes back to her ultimate very often, which is great. Just keep in mind, a lot of these, well, everyone except Erich, which is still technically single target hits, all of them are single target. So when it comes to the very end game dragon, resurgent dragon fights, you're going to notice your single target teams or heroes are just not going to do the damage you expect. It's harder to place the debuffs you need. It doesn't place them sometimes. And, well, you need to do AoE so you're hitting, like, the head, the body, the head, the tail, or whatever the hell it is, all of them together. So wild, I mean, if you have a strong wild team with Flora or something you're using for Vortex, you'll still get okay damage, but don't expect your amazing Vortex wild team to do just as good at the endgame boss because you really need AoE damage there. So that's a little bit of a heads up for the sake of the endgame content. So I think we kind of cover the niche roles. I feel like it's a really, really good synergy. Just be careful early on. It's one of the best synergies for getting like all the things you need. Like plenty of people do attack penalty. Plenty of people do heal reduction, you know, as far as poison and fire goes. Like it's really, really a great synergy right now. It's going to change, of course, in Season 2. But for now, that's what it is. And they work great together. Like, I was lucky enough to have an Ogok, and he was my beast for Vortex. So yeah, let's transition to Vortex. Vortex. All right. So, again, Poisoners can be okay for the long boss fights, but you kind of want to keep the stacks of poison up. And so many of these heroes, like, trigger the poison explosion and get rid of the poison stacks, kind of defeating the purpose of stacking it up in the first place. So if you have the option and you've got a decent wild team going, even if it's just like, if you have Erich and Tunnelnon and no Flora, it's still very strong to do a wild team for Vortex. Wild is all very much scaling on extra damage chances and scales very well with attack and attack percent. It's still the highest potential, I think, in the game for just doing Vortex damage, mainly because of our girl Flora up here, but you still can get away with the budget-friendly version of Erich, Tunnelnon, Refe Foley, and you'll be pretty solid with that, honestly, as your 3 DPS, and then have Adolphus and Isolde, or Furboth and Adolphus, or Furboth, and if you get another support, or like Furboth and Hexandra, Isolde and Hexandra, any combination of the good healers and like the tanks in these two do very well as not just a tank job. So like technically in Vortex you don't need a tank. Everyone's taking the same hits. But luckily in this game, Isolde and I guess back to Poisoners, Isolde and Furboth are both very great tanks to also help keep your team alive in Vortex. Really strong for Vortex. I mean, Horus, like I said, is okay for Vortex because he's going to survive. But just remember that his attack penalty is on his battle skill, so you can't time it. So if you want to make sure you have attack penalty up before like the 3rd or the 4th main skills, you know, you kind of want to have someone that has attack penalty on their ultimate so you could time it better. So I would not suggest having Horus as the only attack penalty hero in your Vortex comp. But yeah, I mean, Elfie is fine to enable a wild team as well. He wasn't quite as good as I expected, though he does have a pretty hard-hitting battle skill with ignoring defense. But I still personally found Refe to be a lot better for that team comp. But I love the wild and poison combinations for Vortex. It's still very good this season, so hopefully you guys can take advantage of it. Just keep in mind the poisons can be tricky and a little bit hard to build, but it can be okay if you could really stack up the poisons, but you really want multiple poison heroes. Also, don't be afraid to just use your Sigrid in Guild Boss, or in Vortex, I mean, early on or throughout for a while. I saw a lot of people doing amazing damage with Sigrid because she just hits hard. She has a solid attack, and then she brings attack penalty too on her ultimate. So if you have someone else like Horus as your only tank option, to bring a little bit more support, and you don't really have a great, like, if you don't have like a Soul Day, or Furboth, and you are using Horus in your team for more attack penalty, she can be timed to use it on the before like the ultimate, and he can just hopefully land it in extra random times to help with overall survivability as well. But yeah, I love Sigrid for everything, and she actually, even though you sounds like, oh wait, she's the AoE person, great for Goblin because of this, you can use her for Vortex too, which I think I've seen some pretty impressive runs with that. Yeah, that's all for this video, guys. A Poison and Fire are a great synergy. It will change for Season 2, and if you haven't already seen, I did a video on Ice and Necrotic. That one was posted before, and I will do another one for Lightning and Radiance, so I'll have this little 3-part series to cover all the bases of talking about team synergy for the specific elemental affinities. Hope this helped out all of you Season 1 people or new players just starting out, and I'll see you in the next video.